Welcome to the Tech Perspective podcast presented by Flatiron School, the show featuring perspectives from people all across the tech industry landscape. My name is Jelani. I am your host. Today, I'm joined by Entrepreneur, host of the Black Tech Green Money podcast, which is a brilliant name for that podcast, by the way, and brand manager at AfroTech. Welcome to the podcast, Will Lucas.
Hey, it's an honor to be here, man. Thank you.
I appreciate you being here, man. So I kind of wanted to start really at the beginning because as I dug deeper into your career, I thought, oh, this is just a brand manager at AfroTech, but no, you're a lot more than that. So would love to hear more about your beginnings. I know you started out in radio and how you kind of moved into entrepreneurship and then eventually into AfroTech.
Yeah, so I'll try to condense the story because it can go on all day. But I always knew I was going to be an entrepreneur. I just thought it was going to be in the music business. And so um, growing up as a kid, songwriting, and I wanted to be a producer particularly. So growing up in the Midwest, I figured, okay, what's the closest thing to the music business? Because I don't live in, a music hub. And so I said, radio station. So that's the closest thing I can do to get to my dream of being in the music business. And so when I was in high school, I went to this teen summit, and there was a program director for a local radio station on that teen summit. And I went up to him after the event. He says, so I was saying, hey, my name's Will Lucas, and I want to be in the music business. And he says, well, the best thing I can tell you to do is find an internship somewhere. And so he said, matter of fact, just come out to the station. And because there was like a line of other students waiting to talk to him. So he said, just come out to the station and we'll talk some more. So the next day, I go out to the radio station, and um, he tells me the same thing. He says, he gave me like this musician's friend catalog, which is like a catalog where you can buy like a bunch of gear, like gear I didn't have the money to
Mm.
buy. But he was like, here's this catalog. And, again, like the best thing I can tell you to do is find an internship somewhere. So as a matter of fact, we need an intern here. And so my internship started that day at the radio station. And I was there every day right after high school, right after I got out of school to intern. And he produced, and he was the host of the 3 to 8 drive time radio show. And so as soon as I got out of school, I would go out to the station and, just sit with him during his show. 3 days into my internship, he put me on the air with him during the 5 o'clock traffic jam. And so I would finish the rest of his show from 5 to 8 every day after that with him since that third day of my internship. 6 months after that, they gave me my own Saturday night radio show. I was 18, doing Saturday night radio, had the #1 show in the city.
Wow.
6 months after that, right before I turned 19, he went to the morning show and they gave me his drive time radio show weekdays. So by this time I had graduated. So I was doing drive time radio right before I turned 19. But again, I got into it and I was #1 in my demographic, like 12 to 24. I was #1 in the city. And so again, I got into this to be in the music business. And so I did that for like 2 years, and I ended up moving to Atlanta with a friend of mine who was producing and engineering in recording studios. And so this is like a cool part of the story, which I enjoy telling because I went to live with this guy who I grew up with in Toledo, but he lived in Atlanta. He was engineering at studios, and he takes me to the studio 2 weeks after being there in Atlanta. And I'm going to give you some details here because it makes the story better. And so this studio is like it's Thankonia, so it's Outkast Studio, the rap group Outkast. So it's their
Whoa.
studio,
Yeah.
and so the studio is historically called Boss Town. It's Bobby Brown's old studio, and so Thankonia Outkast bought it from Bobby Brown. So I'm in this studio with Jason, my guy, who I'm living with. He's engineering, and he's trying to get his production career going, but he's engineering. And Whitney Houston was still alive at this time. There's
Mm.
another studio behind Stankonia. And so I can look out the window of this studio and see Whitney Houston standing outside with a group of people. And Bobby is trying to get his music career going again. So he comes in Stankonia, which is his old studio, his old boss town. And he has my guy who I'm living with say, he says, play me some records. He's trying to get his career going again. And so I'm in the studio with Bobby Brown. I'm like, how did I get here? Number one, because I'm
Crazy.
like I just came from Toledo. Like I don't know how I got here. And so also I'm like super ambitious. And so Bobby finds a track that he likes after my guy started to play him just beats. And so this one particular track he played him didn't have any lyrics to it. And so he's just vibing off of this instrumental that's playing. I go to the corner of the room and start writing lyrics to the song that has no lyrics to it. And so Bobby walks over to me and he's like, "What did you write?" And so I sang to him what I just wrote, this piece of paper I just wrote. And he takes the piece of paper and goes into the booth and sings the song I just wrote. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? I feel like I just like turned into Quincy Jones. Like, I've
Right?
been in Atlanta 2 weeks and I'm Quincy. Like, yo, I'm the man now. So anyway, um, so the song ultimately never came out, but that wasn't like the moral. The moral of the story was like you had to put yourself in the position to be successful. To me, so that was like for me like this shining moment of like anything is possible. And so anyway, like
Wow.
a long story short, like the music career didn't go as I wanted it to go, but it opened me up to these other things. So one of those trips coming back home, having being living in Atlanta, I was coming back home to Toledo often just because it was home. And I was walking in this clothing store, and this clothing store was playing FM radio over their sound system. And so, as you can imagine, ultimately the commercials come on, and another clothing store's commercial comes on over the air inside this clothing store. And so I'm looking around like, this don't make a lot of sense because
Right.
imagine being in, Starbucks and hearing, a different coffee shops commercial inside Starbucks. And
Right.
so a like Blue Bottle or whatever. And so I'm like, they need their own radio station that just talks about them. And so this light bulb went off in my head of like, I can build that. I just did all these years of radio. I know how to do radio. So I'm going to build, a custom radio station for brands. And so to make an even longer story short, so today I run a marketing company called Creatio, which we do full service marketing, production, video, the whole thing, communication strategy. But it was based on this original concept of doing live streaming radio for brands. It's called Creatio, Creative Radio. So we do much more now, but it started doing live custom radio stations for McDonald's restaurants, grocery stores, and etc.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so along that time, um, again, I had a radio background. I was starting this startup because I had a bunch of ideas on how we can grow the, Creatio business into tech. And I had a white advisor to my startup ask me, what would it take to get more black kids interested in tech? And I said, well, they need to see like a black Mark Zuckerberg, somebody who looks like them and is realizing success. And at the end of that conversation, I kicked myself because I'm like, we have super successful black people in tech. We just don't know who they are. And
Mm.
so I'm like, I'm gonna do a podcast, featuring, super successful black people in tech. And so it's called Of 10 Podcasts. It's still up on iTunes. Like if you go look, you still see that podcast up because I was only gonna do 10 episodes. That's why it's called Of 10 Podcasts. One of 10, two of 10, three of 10. You get it.
Mm.
So um, so that podcast, which was intended to be 10 episodes and done, because again, I was building a startup. I just wanted to, contribute to the conversation. Um, you know, at the end of that first season, there was this thing I heard about called AfroTech. And I'm like, how did I not know that this conference it was the first year of AfroTech. And I'm like, how did I not know that this happened? Because half the people I interview on the podcast were on the stage at the first AfroTech. And so I'm like,
Mm.
how did I not
Got
know
you.
that this was happening? And
Right.
so I said, I'm never going to miss another Afrotech. And so I went to year two and I knew I was going to have a good time. And so I vlogged every day of the conference. And so it's still up on my YouTube channel. Like if you go to my YouTube, you'll see Afrotech 2017, 3 or 4 different videos that I produced at that conference because I knew I was going to have a good time. And so the conference might have been like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I don't remember, but it was like a 3-day conference. And I vlogged all day on Thursday, went back to my hotel room, edited the video, put it on YouTube that night. And then Friday, people are walking around having seen my video from the day before. And they're like, how did you put that video together so quickly? Because it was just yesterday.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
Right.
That's what I do. So anyway, so all day Friday, I did the same thing. I recorded all day, edited it that night in my hotel room, put it on YouTube, and then Saturday, like, who is this dude putting out all these videos? It's still on YouTube. If you go, you'll find these videos.
Right.
And so I built this name for myself as somebody who was, producing high quality content for, black
Hmm.
techies. And so I went to 2018. I'm gonna try to make this story short because it's a long story, but it's
Nah, you good.
I went to 2018. I didn't do any
Yeah.
video, but um, the caveat to not doing video, I took my wife to that conference. I was like, you got to
Hmm.
see all these black people in tech in San Francisco. Like, number one, there ain't that many black people in San Francisco. So,
Right.
airport security was probably like, what is going on here?
Right.
Um, and so and so all these black people in San Francisco. And at the end of the conference, my wife was like, it's an amazing conference, beautiful, blah 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 blah. You should not come back unless you're on stage. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
like, how am I going to get on this stage? Like, I'm a
Right.
podcaster, entrepreneur, but like the people on that stage are like far and away like doing it,
Right.
just discounting my own, contribution like we do
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason. And so I'm like, all right, challenge accepted. And so I put this picture of an Afrotech speaker on my vision board. And so I think it was Anwar Bey. He's a black techie. I think I found a picture
Hmm.
of him on Google Images speaking on the Afrotech stage. And I said, all right, this is what I'm going to bring into my life. And so I put it on my
Hmm.
vision board. And every day I woke up looking at my vision board because it was right next to my dresser. And I see this picture of the things I want to call into my life, Afrotech being one of them, just intending to speak. And so, right around the time where they called up the application for speakers where you could apply to speak, I get an email, and it's a girl who works for Blavity, which owns Afrotech, and says, hey, just talk to Morgan, who's the CEO of Blavity, which owns Afrotech. And she's like, hey, we're going in a new direction for Afrotech. And Morgan said we should talk to you about running it. And I'm like, I just was trying to like get on. Nobody knew, number one, outside of me and my wife. I'm trying to figure out how can I get on this stage, and they're saying,
Right.
"Here are the keys to the kingdom. Like we want you to run it."
Mm.
And so that's how me coming to Afrotech happened.
Wow. That is, you should never apologize for making that story long because that's a hell of a story. I mean,
Yeah,
that is,
yeah,
wow. There's so many pieces of that I wanted to ask about. So I'll start with, I guess, the entrepreneurship, your entrepreneurship side. Uh, and it's just because this is something that I recently saw and started doing a little bit of digging about is the Great Resignation. And I'm always interested about like how people, especially entrepreneurs, are viewing that Great Resignation as people that are not wouldn't be able to quit necessarily in a traditional sense. And I was actually watching Gary Vee talk about it. He said he feels like people are leaving their jobs because one, like people just generally are putting up with less, and then two, they feel like they have a lot more options and avenues for income and financial freedom. But curious to hear your take on it as an entrepreneur.
yeah. I have to be careful with my words because I want to make sure this comes across with the intent that I mean it.
Okay.
I have no issues with like the Great Resignation. I think it's for people who were tired of living the life that they lived. They never had a moment to breathe, to think about, is this the life I want to live? And now they get that moment to contemplate and be thoughtful, introspective, etc., and decide a different future for themselves. Great, wonderful. Do that. You should figure that out. You should take those moments to really decide if you're living the life. You only get one, so you got to figure out if you're living the life that you've decided you want to live. With that said, and here's where it gets like interesting for me is one, if you are taking this moment to just, get the wonderful checks that we're getting from the government and, hanging out and not really educating yourself, building some skills to make yourself more valuable, you'll find yourself back in the type of lifestyle that you didn't want to be in the first place because that money will run out. It won't always be there. And so, what you have to do is build the skills in the moment of time of grace that you have to make yourself more valuable and more marketable. And so if you're not doing that and you just like chilling, on the subsidy
Yeah.
you're getting in the meantime and not building and increasing your value to the marketplace, you're going to be back in or worse than you were
Right.
previous. And so I encourage people to really be thoughtful about how they spend this time because we can hear stories all day long about, I decided not to go back to my job at Wendy's, or I decided to not back to my job, at the gas station. I'm going to take some time, walk my dog at noon, or, take a 3 hour coffee break with friends.
Right.
And fine, but what are you doing to make sure that you don't have to go back to
Right.
Wendy's? No, no shade on Wendy's, but if
No
they may be
shade
a
on
sponsor, I have
Wendy's.
no idea. But no shade on
Right.
Wendy's. Those are good jobs for some people. you know.
Yeah.
But if you are determined not to go back to the lifestyle that you were living, then you got to do something different. And if you're not putting in that, if you're not investing this time wisely, you will find yourself back in that or in a worse position. Because what'll happen is entrepreneurs who can't find the employees to work will find ways to work around those people. And so if you go into like a tropical smoothie today, or let's say, in a smoothie shop, they used to have 3, 4 people working, can't find people. What are they gonna do? They got to keep the doors open, so they'll go buy a $15,000 blender. So now that takes the place of a person. So now instead of needing 4 people, now I only need three. And so then we're gonna do cashless checkouts. And so now I don't need 3 people, I need two. And so what's gonna happen is people will find a way to keep operations going, and that will reduce the chances that you'll find yourself a good opportunity if you're not investing this time wisely.
That's a great point because as an entrepreneur, your entire lifestyle is dependent on problem solving constantly. So if the
Yeah,
problem is now a problem of human resources, you'll find non-human resources to figure it out,
that's right.
especially in 2022. I mean, why not, right? I think, and that's kind of the whole premise of Flatiron School as well, is like for us to essentially help people get those 21st century skills. So once the pandemic started, as horrific and catastrophic as it was, and still is to this day, a lot of people came after losing their jobs. They ended up coming to Flatiron School to try to reskill and kind of get those new those new 21st century skills to be able to become marketable in the workplace. And speaking of which, I thought it was really interesting that and radio might be, and you can tell me if radio is like a different game for this. Uh, it was interesting that you took a non-paid internship in order to gain the real world experience. And obviously, like, you were pretty meteoric in your rise. Like, that was, I mean, to be doing a Saturday show, 3 days after is probably uncommon. But
Yeah, yeah,
one of the conversations that we've been having as not only a school, as a community in the tech space is, should you be doing internships in the tech industry? And by internships, I really mean internships that maybe are not paid, or they're low paid beyond much lower than what you think your skill set is worth. And maybe there's a bit of like a inflation of what you think you could do versus what the marketplace thinks you can do. But I'm curious, like, do you think that's something that's like specific to industries, or should this really be a blanket statement across all industries if the internship is valuable enough?
yeah. So my response to that is a blanket statement. One, and I'm gonna come from both sides, the employer side and the intern side. And so
Okay.
the employer has a responsibility. Every employer has a responsibility to make sure that they are not using interns just because they don't want to pay people. But it's a give back to community. It's a give back. It's feeding the pipeline of your future actual employees. It's making sure that you're providing experiences that allow people to get upskilled so that they can
Right.
ultimately fit in a true paid experience. And some people decide because market forces. Some people do decide to pay interns because you get better quality interns. Because if company X is paying, for interns, why not company Y? And so there are dynamics that play into that respect from the employer side. So the employer does have a responsibility to make sure that the internship experience is a valuable one. And on the other side, as an intern, I have to decide, am I getting out of this experience what puts me in a better position to capitalize on the value that I bring? And so
Mm,
whether I'm paid $1 an hour, $0 an hour, or $20 an hour, I have to decide, am I getting closer to what I want? It to me, it wasn't about the money because I was getting closer. Again, I told you, I had to decide, okay, what's the closest thing to the music business? Radio.
right.
So radio was putting me in position. So I didn't care if it was
Mm,
paid because I was getting closer to what I wanted. It put me in the path. And so you have to decide as the intern, does it put me in the path? And if it does, it's worth it because the reward, the money will come. But if you're not in position, you won't even realize the money is going past you if you're not in position.
that's a good point. That's a good point. When you said put yourself in position, I almost thought of like I've heard comedians say this a lot. Like they'll work the door of a comedy club, and then as like a reward, they'll get like 5 minutes here while like people are setting up and stuff like that. Like they'll get time like that. I've heard about musicians doing similar things, sort of just like being in the space, even when sometimes it even costs you to get there. You know,
That's a
um,
fact.
yeah. I'm because you mentioned we're talking about internships. A lot of our students get approached by like smaller startup companies to come work. And how would you say any advice on like how to evaluate a smaller startup company if they're offering you an internship or even a position? Really, like how should someone evaluate like these smaller startup tech companies uh, to see if like this is a place that's sort of viable for me to stay, build, grow, and maybe there's a little bit of sustainability in this actual company, even though startups is always a gamble.
Yeah. I mean, I start with, do you believe in first the leadership and the vision and product of the company? Do you believe that, because I mean, there have been remarkable ideas that have been poorly executed and those companies have failed. That's
Right.
the gamble that you take in any startup. But do
Right.
you believe in those three things? Do you believe in the vision? Do you believe that the future looks like what this company is building? Do you believe that the product that that company is building is what could win in the marketplace regarding that future? And then do you believe that the leadership of this company has the hustle, has the knowledge, potentially experience to make it happen? If you
Right.
believe those three things, it's probably worth putting your time into that. If you are just taking a startup opportunity because you got offered one, but you don't like the product, or you don't like the leadership, or you don't believe the future is like this company is planning for, you probably shouldn't
Hmm.
spend your time there.
That's a good
Period.
point.
Whether
Yeah.
it's a big
Period.
company or big startup, a funded startup or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. I was about to say it doesn't matter even the size of the company. I think that kind of goes
Yeah, it doesn't
across the
matter.
board for real.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, you know, as I think about AfroTech, one, I'll put this out there. I've never been, but I've wanted to forever. Um, but it always falls on a weekend or a day that I can't go. Um, I'm curious, like, one, do you have like a most memorable experience from AfroTech that really jumps out at you and really sort of encompasses what that weekend and that conference is really about?
I don't know if it's like one experience, but Afrotech changed my life. And I'm not the only person who would tell you that. I mean, to see, we already have issues with representation, one, but to see 15,000 Black people in a room or rooms, all talking about the future of the world, all building remarkable things, all with swag. You know what I'm saying? All of us are there in our full Blackness, wherever we are, whether it be Afrotech exec, like we just did in LA, whether it be AfroTech in San Francisco 3 years ago, whether it be AfroTech in Oakland 2 years ago, whether it be, AfroTech in Cleveland, or, AfroTech experience in Detroit. Like, you gotta go. You have to go. And we've been doing Afrotech in the metaverse for the last 2 years. So, you know, there's really, like, wherever you are in the world, there's an experience that you'll be able to take advantage of, that you will meet people who are on this journey with you and who got your back. There are companies that want to hire you. Um, these companies spend a lot of money to get in front of you. And so they are serious about hiring you. And so, um, I wouldn't, there's not one experience, because the whole experience is worth the ticket. It's worth the plane ticket. It's worth the hotel. It's worth the Airbnb. It's worth sleeping in the van. I mean, it's worth it. You got to
Mhm.
be there.
That is the best pitch for Afrotech. I love that. And I mean, you convinced me. I mean, I wanted to go, but damn, now I
Yeah.
need to go because I love the way you
You, I
just
mean,
put that.
you can't, this is an unmissable thing. If you're in the business of building a company, being part of a company being built, you have an idea for the future, you cannot miss Afrotech. I'm just saying, and I was doing this before I was part of Afrotech. I
Right.
said I would never miss another one before I was in it. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? And so, because I
Right.
knew this is the future. So I want to be a part of the future.
And Afrotech is going to be in
Unmissable.
Miami this year, right?
Yeah, that we're doing Afrotech Exec in Miami. And so Afrotech Exec is for, corporate executives, CEOs, CFOs. If you're an executive, that's what Afrotech Exec is for. The Afrotech conference, we have not announced yet where that's going to be.
Got you. Got you. Um, this is a question that I've been, I don't know, I guess personally wrestling with and talking about it with every time I started hosting this Black Excellence in Tech for Flatiron School. I think maybe around, I think I started in 2019, and we've done it 5 times. And this is a question that I ask a lot about, and it's the talent pipeline. And when I see things like Afrotech, you have 15,000 people, like you mentioned, 15,000 Black people all in this space. And I wonder if, in terms of our representation, because I think the last number I saw was like 7%, but is that, are we looking at tech through too narrow of a lens? Because everything is tech, right? And I've heard you say tech is a tool, right? And I just wonder if, one, is there a pipeline issue on the side of the employers, as well as a pipeline issue on our side of educating the kids younger, so they see this as an option, as not even just an option. I think they know tech is an option. I think maybe having it as a approach to them as a sexier option, because I look at, the more traditional options that we look at, like, sports, entertainment. Those options look really appealing because it's very flashy. And I'm wondering if there's an issue on both ends of the pipeline, and how do we sort of address those? I mean, they're massive issues, but I'm curious about what your take is on if there's two different pipeline issues, and if there are, how do we address that?
So there's a couple things here I'll speak to. There's one, yeah, there's still a representation thing, because I mentioned this before. We do have super successful Black people in tech, and we are doing the work at Afrotech, and others are doing the work also to make sure that these names and faces are amplified. But it is still an issue when you have, kids who want to play Fortnite 10 hours a day, but don't realize that somebody's on the other side building Fortnite, and there's an opportunity there. So that would be a consistent thing that we continue to have to, to work against, to show that there's an opportunity here to be a part of building that.
Right.
On the other side, um, the pipeline issue with regarding finding talent is, one, an excuse, because you have to put the work in. And so
Right.
those companies that invest to be at an Afrotech realize that there's plenty of people out here who can fill those roles, and they put their money where their mouth is. They're not just out here talking about, we can't find people. That's a lame excuse because they're out here. Third, this is the where my interest is particularly poignant, and that is I'm not interested in shaking my fist at Apple or Google or Facebook and saying hire more of us. I'm like, I'm gonna go build Apple. I'm gonna go build Google. I'm gonna go build Facebook. Like, I'm not interested personally. Now there's a place for
Right.
people who there's a legislative place there. There's a social impact place there. There's a social advocacy place there to say you need to do more about hiring our people because we are whatever percentage of your user base. That's just not what I'm about. What I'm about is like, look, Jelani, like, you can build the next thing. And so I'm interested in getting you to feel like, instead of waiting for somebody to give you a chance, make a chance. That's what I'm interested in.
Where does that desire come from? Has that always been with you? Is that something that you felt? I don't mean to downplay any of your ambitions, but is it something that you were born with, or is it something that you sort of developed over time?
Yeah. I mean, so saying humbly, like, I can do a lot of things. I, I can learn how to do whatever I need to get done. And so I'm like, there's no excuse for waiting for somebody else to do something for me. I'm gonna just go do it. And so I feel like if we put in the work, we can figure these things out. Number one, I believe that we as a people, collectively, we run culture. Like, and this is not just like a statement. Like, these are facts. Like, these are, if you look at dance, if you look at
100%.
sports, if you look at food, if you look at, like, we create those things. And so
Right.
why then do we wait to let people who are monetizing our culture give us opportunity? Why are we waiting for them to give us opportunities? If you and I got together and we can just build the thing and
Hmm.
create, our micro version so that we can take it to our people and our people invest and our people use our products and etc. Why are we not building those companies but instead waiting for others? I've always had that concept to the point of, again, I grew up in the Midwest. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. And if you know anything about the Midwest, particularly Toledo, we're 35, 45 minutes south of Detroit, right? And so
Hmm.
growing up, what I saw was the people who had money were the people who worked at Jeep and General Motors. And so if you asked my peer group when I was in middle school, what do you want to do when you graduate? 98% of them would have told you, my auntie can get me in that Jeep. 98% of them would have told you that. And back then at 13 and 14 years old, I'm like, okay, this don't make sense to me. Like, I want to build the next Jeep. Like, I don't want to I want to build the next one. And so I've always
Right.
had that mindset. And I believe many of us have that twinkling of a mindset, but it gets pushed out of us because of environment and not necessarily like it gets spoken, but we don't see it around us. We don't see, which is again why you need to be at AfroTech. You need to see people who look like you doing this thing because it rekindles that entrepreneurial spirit that I believe is in our DNA, that we can go create, like, we make something out of nothing. We should have that inspired and exposed in the real world. So that's what I'm about.
No, that's real. That's real, and that resonates with me a lot because I just watched maybe like a week ago. I watched Jay Z's acceptance speech at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I had just seen him the week prior. I saw him at Barclays because I went to the game, and to see Jay, a dude from Brooklyn, where I'm from, just walking courtside, walking to the back of the arena after the game, like walking on the Barclays floor like he still owns it, and walks into the back, and then I'll see him his acceptance speech and him talking about sort of where he came from. It That light bulb came into my head like it really doesn't matter the circumstances. You truly can do anything you want if you grind, you study it, and then you apply it, and then you mix in something like Afrotech where you have now a community. It feels
Yeah.
like that combination makes us unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying like I'm really serious when I say you have to put yourself in a position to be successful. I can tell you, and you probably know, there are people from your neighborhood who can sing and who can rap, and there's no excuse to not have a recording. I know
Right.
people who like sing and can sing better than half the people on the radio, but you ask them where's the song, they don't have a song. And I'm like, why is there no song that you can put out to the world to say, look at what I have? And so
Right.
whether you record it on, GarageBand on your phone or your computer, or whether you go to a studio downtown, it's like, why do you not have a product that you can
Right.
give to the marketplace to see if you can build a community of people who support what you do? And so we want to talk a lot about there's no opportunities for us. And there are opportunities, like we talked, like you mentioned a few seconds ago about, the pipeline. And I talk about it, it's an excuse to say, I can't find people. It's too often an excuse in our own community to say, well, I don't have a shot. Well, like, why are you waiting for a shot? Take a shot. I didn't ask anybody, could I go to Afrotech 2017 and record? I just took a camera and I recorded, and I'm here now.
Right.
So I'm not asking anybody, hey, can I build a podcast? I said, look, I was on the radio. I'm gonna put together a podcast, and I did it from my basement. You know, I didn't wait and ask anybody would they buy would they buy into my ideas? I believed in my ideas, and then I went to the people who could make those ideas, commercialable. So I went to my mentor, and he owned 6 McDonald's, and I said, "Look at what I got," and he's like, "That's fantastic. Let me introduce you to the Midwest marketing director." That's how it happened. But imagine I walk up to him and say, "I have a concept," and he's like, "Okay, what can I do with that?" You have to have
Right.
something. Have
Right.
something. It ain't got to be the big
Yeah.
thing. Have something.
Yeah. Wow. That's I'm soaking the game in. I'm soaking it in, man. The the next thing I wanted to chat about was this is kind of in the field of like jumping into things NFTs, cryptocurrency, and
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier, which I did not know, that Afrotech was in the multiverse. Um, I was
Metaverse. Yeah.
it's so the metaverse. Sorry, um, the multiverse is Spider Man.
Yeah.
um, I was talking to my father, and he calls me, and he's like, "Man, you hear about this metaverse thing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I heard about it." He's like, "You hear people are buying real estate in the metaverse?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Why would they do that? There's real estate in the world. Why are they doing this?" And then I had watched an investor, because when things like this happen, when NFTs, crypto, and metaverse, sort of that pool of blockchain technology stuff comes out, it's relatively early to the mainstream, so it may be harder for novices to discern like who's telling the truth and who's not. And I heard this investor say that he feels as though the metaverse and maybe even NFTs is a balloon that will soon pop, and a lot of people will lose money. So I'm curious, as you recently in your last podcast episode, which I will link below, which I thought was really great about how you minted your first NFT. Uh, I'm curious about what you think about the future of NFTs, crypto, blockchain, the metaverse, because I kind of see it the way that credit cards were back when, prior to credit cards, everyone was just straight using cash, and then you start using credit cards, and people are like, "What? My cash is on a card now? What are you talking about?" So, curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of things there again, but like particular to like what you said about how you felt after your dad had that conversation, like the bubble bursting. Yeah, I believe that too. I believe there, but that doesn't mean that there's not value here. And consider I think it was like the late 90s with like there were these humongous web platforms like pets.com and whatever other ones where, these companies who had barely a product were getting these insane valuations. And then the bubble burst, like they went to zero. A lot of these companies who didn't create any value, or created little value compared to the investment puts into them, um, exploded. Like it didn't go anywhere. Like, a lot of people lost a lot of money, and I believe that's going to happen too. There's when I published that episode, I went from getting 10 DMs a day about NFTs to 100 DMs a day about the new NFT, the next crypto punk, the
Yeah.
next, Bored Ape Yacht Club. I mean, because there's so much out here that is designed to be a money grab and is not designed to create community. It's not designed to create true utility. It's not designed to, create value. It's designed to take your money. And there will be a day of reckoning for a lot of this. I'm, concerned for a lot of people who can't afford, an ape. So they'll go buy, a gorilla and, think that they're going to
Mm-hmm.
have the next thing because they're trying to chase a wave when it wasn't. Board Ape Yacht Club wasn't designed that way. And so
Right.
there were very early communities of people who believed that, and a lot of this is fear of missing out too. So, you know, you can go to your DMs after this episode. You're going to go to your DMs and you're going to get flooded with people trying to sell you the next, crypto something, crypto hoodies. Like
Right.
it's going to be something crazy. And so this is designed to take your money. But with
Mm-hmm.
that said, and I mentioned this about like, the pets.com of the world and those other late 90s bubble bursted startups, is that doesn't mean the internet and that doesn't mean domains and that doesn't mean startups is not valuable. What it means is that there are some things that are hyper inflated. There are some things that are scams. There are some things that have no true value that
Right.
will go away and a lot of people will lose, like they lost with those things. And so,
Right.
um, but I also firmly believe that the future looks like me sitting courtside at the Jet the Nets game, and I'm at home. I got on glasses, but I'm courtside at the game. Also, I believe also that I'm at a Jay Z concert, and I'm at home with my glasses on. I believe the future looks like that, and so particularly when we live in a world where I already have Oculus lenses. You can see this. I mean, the Ready Player One has been my favorite book since I read it years ago. And so I knew that this world was coming. And so if you have not read or watched the movie, at least watch the movie, Ready Player One. You
Yeah.
need to watch it. And it's not new. This is the future. The metaverse has been a concept that has been foretold, prophesied for years. And we finally have where technology is actually catching up to the science fiction. And so, if it is true that I can put on my glasses and be anywhere, why would I not buy a piece of that world? Because
Right.
there will be people, if maybe there'll be six metaverses. Maybe Facebook will have one, maybe Apple will have one, maybe Google will have one, maybe there'll be some company that we haven't heard of will have a world, a metaverse. So because that world may be ever expanding, it may be finite, it may be whatever, why would they not sell some of that digital real estate to Jelani? And then he can go and put up a billboard there that says, this is Jelani's house where I record my podcast. And then people can stand by and watch. And you can be sitting in a room like you are by yourself, but there are 100 people. There's your audience is right there. Why would it not?
Right. That's damn. That sounds kind of nice already, man. You just created a nice little world for me right there.
There you go. And so I believe that
Yeah.
that world is coming. It's upon us. And so, yes, I
Yeah.
want to. I minted my first NFT because I wanted to learn publicly, number one, but I wanted to understand what it felt like to create a digital asset that might one day have value. And so it may be none of them sell. I haven't even listed them for sale. You can bid on them right now, and I haven't even announced what the project is yet. So that's a different conversation for a different date. But what I believe is that one day I want to be historically correct. I want to say, okay, one day there's going to be, Jelani the ninth, who sees this, podcast his great grandfather did with a Will Lucas, and oh, I want the NFT from that show, and so that's special.
Yeah, and I agree. And the FOMO thing you mentioned earlier is so true because all of this is driven by our emotions, and we end up losing money because we're so hurried to just get in the game and not truly understand it. So it's so imperative that we take the time to deeply understand what we're buying, why we're buying it. So highly suggest watching the Black Tech Green Money podcast episode, the NFT minting
Yeah.
episode. Really strong episode. Um, and I even see this, the metaverse, AI, all of that stuff as a great opportunity for the future of tech and people coming up in tech right now. Like, think those are the types of opportunities that they have to kind of keep their eye on as they're developing these skills and they're growing in their space.
Yeah, because I want to put an emphasis here, because there will be a bubble burst, like bubbles have burst before. That does not mean the underlying concept and idea does not have value. What it means is that there are certain people in the marketplace who take advantage of a moment and don't actually create value. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't figure out what's coming and how to get in smartly. And don't put more money in that you can afford to lose.
100%. Like, I just read about the Squid Game coin that was a giant scam. The person, like, they
Yeah,
ran up the
yeah,
numbers, took the money, and was gone. So
yeah,
please be
yeah.
careful out
These
here.
things happen, man. These things happen.
Yeah. Um, cool. I mean, man, I appreciate you coming on the pod. The usually the last question that I have for our guests is much more of a personal question, which is, and I know you're gonna have a good one for this one, because you've been dropping dimes dropping jewels this whole episode. So I know you're gonna have a good one for this. What is a quote that you personally live by?
So there was, back when I was about 12 or 13 years old, I was at church and there was this guy. I was walking out of the men's restroom. He was walking in, and um, he said, young man, like, how's it going? I said, I'm just trying to do something small, just trying to, trying, trying to do some small things. He was like, if you're going to do anything, why not do it big? Why not do it? If you're going to do anything, do it big. And it meant so much to me because, again, I mentioned this earlier in the episode, like, we so often discount our contribution to things, and we make, in effort to make other people feel good, we minimize. And I'm like, nah, like, I went to AfroTech and I put together some dope videos for the time. I'm like, that's what I do. I put together those videos. And so I'm not gonna like walk away and say, I just put together this little thing, I just did this little, just, whatever. Like, nah, I put in work. And so
Right.
my mission in life is to create content, create experiences, create things that help Black people realize business success beyond their wildest dreams. And I can't do that
Mm,
trying to do small things. And so I aim to do big things. If you're going to do anything, do it big.
man, I'm inspired. I love it, man. Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Um, I will also, actually, man, tell the people where they could connect with you. They can reach you.
Yeah. First, Black Tech Green Money podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Black Tech Green Money. That's includes Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeart. And I'm signed Charlemagne through iHeart. So the Black Tech Green Money. I'm on Instagram, Will Lucas, WILLLUCAS. And it's pretty, oh, willlucas.co is my website. But yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And with that, see you next time.